Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show.
Over the years now, I've been involved in the development of tens of IoT initiatives with my clients, and there's only one thing they all have in common. Every one of them pivoted. And I don't mean little pivots, I mean 180-degree pivots. The lesson here is to pivot fast and pivot early, otherwise there's a good chance you're not going to make it out of Pilot Purgatory. In this episode of the IoT Business Show, I speak with Phil Regenie about his early pivot and the lessons he learned in taking his senior care product to the pilot stage.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc. Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc. Business Show. This show is for business leaders and managers employing the Internet of Things for their business or the business of their customers. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair, and I interview the industry's leading authorities to find out how they use IoT to improve business and create value. If you like this show, subscribe to it on iTunes and go to iotinc.com to check out my complimentary articles, videos, meetups, and webinars. Turns out there aren't that many experts in AI when applied to IoT. So it's taken me a little bit longer to corral them into the show. But I have an excellent guest to start. Brett Greenstein, he is the VP for Watson IoT at IBM. He'll be the first in the series. But until then, this is an excellent episode with Phil Regenie. Phil's a good guy and a longtime listener of the show. And he'll share his experiences in developing an IoT product from scratch to serve the senior care market. If you enjoyed this podcast, consider funding it by becoming a certified IoT professional, by completing the IoT Inc. Certified IoT Professional, or ICIP, online training program. It pulls together pretty much everything I know on IoT into 3 courses: the ICIP Technology course, ICIP Business course, and the ICIP Strategy and Digital Transformation course, all of which are inside the program. Details about the ICIP program can be found at www.iot-inc.com/training. And with that, I give you a good bed, sensible shoes, and the art of the IoT pivot with Phil Regenie. With me today on the IoT show is Phil Regenie. Phil is the founder and CEO of Zanthion, where he's responsible for the company's vision for senior care, managing sales, business development, and technology. He has over 35 years of experience as a tech executive and entrepreneur with executive roles in enterprise design, product, and business management. Phil, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
So we've kind of known each other virtually for years now. I mean, maybe 3 years. I think you're one of the early people that signed up for my newsletter. Is that right? That's how we connected, right? It was just through email?
Yeah, it was through email. And I think there's a lot of groups that we belong to that are
the same, yeah. Well, it's good to have you on the show, and I think I'm going to start off with a pretty broad and philosophical question. So, what are the 4 secrets to happiness and health?
I like that, Bruce. I like that. They're the things you spend the most time in. Your bed, your shoes, of course.
Okay.
Your car, and, but actually low anxiety, eat well, exercise well, and sleep well, and those will keep you from getting dementia.
Okay, well, dementia is something we're trying to avoid. So it's funny because you give like a little philosophy lesson, a little lesson on your email. This, by the way, everyone, comes from Phil's what do you call it? The email footer. The little note that comes at the end of the email. And I just thought it was interesting because I actually read it over a few times. I go, yeah, that makes sense. And you said, yeah, you spend those are the areas you spend the most time, except for when you're walking, running, swimming, skiing, and I think hiking. I think that was the activities that you mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about how much time we spend at work and sleeping, it's really the majority of our life. So the majority of our life is spent sitting and in bed.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. So let me ask you, how long have you had your bed? And I think everyone listening probably asked themselves the same question. But how long have you had your bed?
I've been a serious athlete for years, and which means I've had lots of back problems. That's what that equates to. And so I've had about 10 beds.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
Oh, at least. Honestly, I've been through every bed you can imagine. The hard ones, the soft ones, the Sleep Number, right now, we have, I forgot the name of this. It's comes in a blue box. Casper. Yeah. Casper. Right now we have the Casper bed, which works great for me, but is a little bit too hard for my wife. She's a small 110 pounds and I'm big. So,
So now, did you get this online? Because that was my next question, because it seems like e-commerce is at least on the way of taking over the bed business, because it's so complicated when you go in to buy a bed. It's like, what really? What's the differences here? And then you kind of lay on them. So was that online, or have you bought one online yet?
Yeah, and it was literally delivered the next day.
No kidding.
And we're on the second floor, so they delivered it. They looked it up. They dropped it off, unboxed it, unfurled like a sail, and threw it on the bed, and it's been great since. This one's been pretty good. Usually the most I get out of them is a year. So I've been pretty happy with this one. It's more than a year.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm embarrassed to tell you how long I've had my bed, but anyway, let's move on. It still seems to work fine. I don't know, but I agree with you, because if you are, it makes a lot of sense. If you're spending, and I've been trying to sleep more and more, just in general. And if you're spending 6 to 8 hours, that's 25 to 33% of your time. So it totally makes sense to make that to be a huge investment. But in any case, let's move on. Why don't you let everyone know? Tell me about your background, a little bit about yourself and your background in IoT.
Well, I've been around a while, and I suppose my first start in IoT was on the C17 fly-by-wire project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, of course, it's real-time IoT, in millisecond timings on things, and our job was quality control. But since then, I've gone through these different disciplines, including medical care, medical management, and quality control for AT&T. And before my parents died, I was working at SunEdison, and SunEdison is a great example, or was a great example of IoT, because it has a lot of distributed hardware that's collecting a lot of information specifically about edge cases like clouds and when it's nighttime and that kind of thing, and then transporting that data in real time. Well, actually not in real time. To a back end, so much data, because they had used solar fields.
Now, this is just for everyone listening. SunEdison is a utility company, right, for electricity? Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a solar utility company.
Solar utility. Okay.
Right. But at one time, and may still, even with their having gone out of business, have the largest amount of solar installations in the world.
Okay.
But those come with a bunch of hardware that fail, of course, and the most expensive thing that you could when you're running a business like that is a truck roll. It's human.
Yes,
it's human collateral, right? Yeah. So it turns out that that's a sophisticated problem. And SunEdison did not handle it well at the time. As a matter of fact, they were taking readings every 15 minutes, and If you think about clouds and how they affect solar panels and weather patterns and all that, detecting a cloud with a 15-minute interval of data is pretty pathetic. So that's kind of the start of.
Okay. And what were they collecting? Just out of curiosity, I mean, per 15 minutes, what were they actually collecting?
10,000 data points.
No kidding. Oh, okay. Now you're saying across 10,000 data points per installation, or that is one per installation? How does it work out?
Okay, so it works out that each solar panel is actually so they have tens of thousands of solar panels.
Sure.
Right, and they're located in fields, and those are actually tied to inverters, and inverters are tied to switches, which go to. So each one of these is a potential failure point along the route of the amount of electricity that's coming from that panel in a given period of time. And what you want to know is what's not working. Turns out to be the hardest problem.
Yes.
And you want to know how much you're getting from what you've got. So those 10,000 points have to do with all of that equipment, and then the actual data from the solar cells around the panel.
How much is generating? You're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, so you were how were you involved in the project then?
I was hired in as an analyst originally, and then I became a product manager, and that's really where I got my introduction to how to optimize IoT for a consumer-based product. Right. So their implementation, they were creating a new gateway. Gateway is a collection hub. Right, and their gateways ran on power line control and Wi-Fi and cellular, and so they had a whole bunch of control on the gateway, and they were making their own gateway and their own software that did the controls.
Okay,
and so there was the hardware implementation, which took them years, and I'm guessing $5 to $7 million for just the design and development of it. Yeah. It could have been around 4, but they were very poor about their economics and their numbers. Okay. And these were the issues that came about. How do you implement an effective IoT system? Basically a collection, and they were doing HMI, some control, but it really was just a cost overrun on that project. So I was the program and product manager for it at one point once it got into trouble. And really my methodology was simple. Don't change things. Don't change any design parameters. Get your product out the door. Make sure that it meets some minimal criteria. And then go from there. And literally, I ran interference from upper management to keep them from micromanaging the changing components literally on a daily basis. So, and you know what that does to engineers. I mean, they never finish.
Yeah. To some extent, they love it. To another extent, they hate it.
Yeah, it's so frustrating for them. You know what they really want is to have a child. Something they're proud of.
Grow, yeah.
So anyhow, that was the introduction, and that actually segued into my parents dying, and you know what you go through when that happens, and so I solved a problem. That's what we do today. Yeah.
Now, how many years ago did you leave Edison?
4.
4 years ago. Okay, so relatively recent. And then that takes us. Well, that's what I want to ask you. So, everyone, the reason I asked Phil on the show is that he's pretty much went from concept to product delivery, and we're going to find out how far along things are of an IoT product. Obviously, you've just heard he's got some great experience, and then he's applied it to quite a different market. So that's going to be more or less at a high level what we're going to talk about. So, Phil, why don't you first start by telling us a little bit about your company and then the product direction and sort of how you arrived there, because that's, I guess, the concept, or I guess ideation's where we started. So maybe talk to us a little bit about ideation, how you started, and kind of how you went through that process.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, because I really did not have an intention of doing another company. I'd done 5, and when I stopped working at Sun Edison, I decided I'd write a book finally. So I was in the process of doing that, but one of the engineers that I managed in the program came to me with an idea and said, I've got the engineering, but I don't have the ability to run a company. Would you run this for me? And I looked at the idea and I thought, well, it might have some legs. And so I thought about it a while. I checked it out. And at that time, the idea was really, how can we transport data with an assured delivery and as much as you possibly can. So what he had done is optimize RabbitMQ, which is a messaging platform, and written code to roll over from different delivery mechanisms. So we rolled from Wi-Fi to cellular. And when we first started off of that, I said, okay, let's give it a shot. So I took out the bankroll and started paying money and started down the road of, well, what can we do with the messaging service? I wish I'd thought of Slack, actually. But we were talking to some pretty big hitters in basically IoT. That wasn't the intent at first. So Ken Foster was someone that we were talking to, and he said, "Well, there's no legs in messaging." Yeah, tell that to Slack right now. So I started thinking, okay, there's no place to go with messaging. What is a messaging platform good for? Where can you apply it? And at that same time, my parents were dying. So I had those problems that everybody has, where people that you love, they fall on the floor and literally they cannot push that darn button. And
the one around their neck, you mean?
Yeah, they just don't have the energy, Well, and sometimes they don't want to. So it turns
good point.
So and they lay there for hours and hours. And I moved to California to take care of my mom. So one time she laid on the floor for 8 hours. She was 2 rooms down from me. Couldn't hear her. Had no idea. Wake up in the morning. It makes you feel terrible, and makes them feel terrible. And you see that decay. When they fall, they stop moving as much. And of course, the not moving as much makes their muscles weaker. Makes your balance less. And it's a vicious circle. We all go through it at some time. So the point is how do we avoid going through that as much as possible? I figured we could do it with the backbone that we had, which was messaging. And then it came down to, and because I'd worked on program management of a gateway and communications, I had the background for putting something together that was low cost, open architecture to meet the needs of fall detection.
Okay.
Yeah, and really that kind of expanded because it wasn't my goal. My goal was health. So it's really the same as the bottom of my email. I think that things work together. And that when you're going to characterize a system, by the way, all these IoT systems, any system that's got a lot of parts connected, they all suffer from the same thing, which is alarm hell.
Alarm hell, yes.
Alarm hell. Where there's all these dependent things on functionalities that are happening, and you get an alarm and it just cascades forever, and you don't know which one's the most critical and where the actual failure is, and so this is the same with human health, and we're so fortunate to live in this day and age where we can take AI, which is such a beautiful filtering mechanism, and look at a large array of things that are happening and combine those in an image of what, with a label that says, when all of these things happen right now, that means that this is going to happen in just a moment. This is so we get that predictive, and we also get the cumulative, and that was the main goal. the main goal was to take a bunch of sensors in an environment, characterizing their behavior, and to determine what the future holds for them and how to mitigate it.
Okay, so you started out more on the messaging side, and then you pivoted to say, okay, where's a good application for this messaging? Kind of life kind of pointed you, or interest and life pointed you in the direction of health. And then in particular, because of your personal circumstances, you and experience, you said, yeah, fall detection, and then broadening it out from there. And then you said you're basically sensing, and then I'm hearing AI, and I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that. But is that the summary of kind of how you got to where Zanthion's, or at least the product direction for Zanthion today?
A much better summary than mine, Bruce.
Okay. All right. So you sense the environment, and then when you collect the data, now you mentioned AI. So I want to ask you, first of all, because we're going to be starting a series, I guess depending on when we play, we will have played a series on AI. But I'd like to ask you, you're looking at AI for predictive now. How would you characterize AI versus analytical models to be able to do the predictions, or did you not even look at the two and you just chose AI, a cognitive model?
No. We start with the analytical models.
Okay.
And our AI is in its infancy. But
sure.
How this happens is the first thing that you have to do whenever there's a signal, no matter what signal, and all signals follow the same paradigm. They have frequency, they have amplitude, and they have noise.
Right.
Right. So your goal is to smooth out the signal so that you don't have any noise, which, and this turns out to be another difficult problem, because every time you take something away, you might be taking something that's valuable away. Mm-hmm. So, and then to determine what those amplitudes and frequencies mean out of that signal. So, that turns out to be the analytics part of it. And given that information, you can characterize an amazing amount about your environment. So for an example of that might be, and actually we use this for a bed exit alarm, which I really like. So there, and fall detection. So fall detection is more complex than you might think, because people all walk differently, and especially as you get older, you might be in a walker, and your walk might be very slow. And your fall might be incredibly slow. You may
it could be like a crumble, or it could be a collapse.
You might lean against the wall. You might slowly collapse. Right. So there's characterizing that becomes a difficult issue. That the one thing that is for sure after they fall is it a really critical fall is they don't move afterwards. Okay, so what you see when you have sensors is a sequence of events. But if you just thresholded, which is old style analysis of signals, and on the C-17, exactly how it worked, actually, is that you have a signal and you say, okay, I expect an amplitude, how big it is to be this, a max and a min. You throw out the noise, and then you look for things that are outside your window of operation. And when something happens outside your window of operation, you go, boom, that's a problem, and then you scream to it, right? Of course, if someone jumps down off of a step, that looks a heck of a lot like a fall, or if you drop down and do a push-up, that looks like a fall. So in order to be accurate, you need to couple events together, and that turns out to be the analytics. So that's what we did. We started off with an analytics model that smoothed the signal, looked for amplitude and frequency, correlated that to behavior, and then took multiple events, each event meaning a characterization of behavior, like a walk, a fall, a stay in place, a slight movement, a bed exit, like a little tiny, when you're breathing, you have this accelerometer event, in your bed. And then, if you get out of bed, you don't get that accelerometer event with the same frequency and amplitude. And then, then if you don't get back in bed and it's dark, we figure something's wrong. So that's the basis of the analytics. The problem with that is that it's not comprehensive enough. And so that's why you go towards AI. You go towards AI because you want to go, okay, look, given their oxygen and their blood pressure and their activity beforehand and their heart rate, now when they drop down and do it, they're dropping down and doing a push-up, right? Because there's all these factors involved that characterize that behavior.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so what you're and just for everyone listening, and Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking amplitude and frequency, and you're just generalizing because all sensors, I guess one-dimensional sensors are going to be analog to start, and so they're going to have an analog signal, and that's going to be a signal. If you plot it over one dimension over time, then it's going to be up and down, and just how big it goes up and how big it goes down. And then depending on what the sensor is, it just means different things, right? So you're generalizing amplitude and frequency for all types of different types of sensors. Just right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Right. I mean, audio and video fall into those categories, right? And then it turns out to be a linear algebra problem, where you transform dimensions into a single, multiple dimensions into a single dimension, and then how do you deal with it?
Yeah, and hopefully transform it into a dimension that's of use that you can pull some interesting data out of. And so it sounds like that's the analytical part. So you're prepping up the data, you're kind of removing the signal from the noise or removing the noise from the signal, depending on how you want to think about it. And then you're saying you're using AI to then do, I guess, very sophisticated pattern matching. Is that a fair way to characterize it at a high level, the way you're using the AI?
I think it's a very fair way. The way that, and right now, since we're in our infancy, I can give you an idea of how we're doing it. There's features and a target. The features are what components of the data means something. And a lot of times it can be raw data and then a calculated piece of data. And then an example of that with an accelerometer might be the X, Y, and Z axis over a period of time. And at the same time, you're getting the X, Y, and Z axis, you're showing their oxygen level. And right. And and usually with accelerometers, use a vector form, which is actually all three axes combined. So you'd have X, Y, Z and a vector, the oxygen level. Okay. So that's a simple example. And then with these three features, we actually use a labeling system within our software. So we confirm all events with human behavior. So what does that mean? It means that if something happens, in our world, someone responds to it. If someone asks for help, someone automatically falls. If someone soils their diaper, if someone, all of these things have someone going to it. And then they actually confirm whether what the machine said or what the person said happened. And that puts a label on that event. Right. Okay. So, and so once you put a label on that event and you bookend a period of time, then you've got what's necessary to do some AI on it, which is really the nature of the filtering, like you said.
Okay. So and just to go down a little bit further, and then we'll pop back up. We've got just in this example, we've got the 3 dimensions of the accelerometer, and then I don't know, another 1, 2, 3 dimensions for the breathing. That gives you a multidimensional kind of, I like thinking about these as shapes. So that's just how I think. So you've got a shape, and then you then correlate that shape, because there always is cause and effect. And the way you do it is you correlate it with an event. And then what the AI is doing is saying, well, if I recognize this shape again, then I'm predicting this event's going to occur. Is that a good way of saying it?
Perfect. And if you think about, what that means is that you have to have a lot of data, right? Which is a big data thing, right? So what you want to do is have as many examples leading to that, so that the filtering device can find those things that you visually or analytically wouldn't be able to notice.
Yeah. Okay, well, we won't get into that right now unless you have some strong thoughts about it. But this can also be done with analytics. So, you can use an analytical model to do pattern matching in multiple dimensions. But now we're seeing more cognitive models that are being used, again, to do this pattern matching, but with, I guess you have to say a different way. And I don't know when one way is better than the other way. And I don't know when I think speed is also kind of something that has to be considered here. But this is kind of the transition, and it sounds like you've been researching into this. So maybe talk to us a little bit about the transition from analytical models and the cognitive models, and kind of, I don't know if you've uncovered this yet, but when one works better than the other.
Yeah, and I haven't uncovered it. So at this point in time, we recognize that what we really want is a predictive model.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to identify, and it's another thing to predict. So we're not far enough along that curve for me to give you anything conclusive on it. I can say that the analytics, there's a lot of companies pursuing all of this at the same time. Sure. And none of us are really hitting a mark that's even close to natural language processing, which nowadays is at 97, 98%. Mm-hmm. So that is what our goal needs to be is 98% effective identification and prediction.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so you have the product idea. And maybe just talk to us about the sources of data, and then I'm going to ask kind of like the next step is how you move from there to the application code and the rest of that. But I'm getting that you're sensing the room. I'm getting that you're sensing the human. That's at a very high level. Can you maybe just take us through your digitization? So in other words, how have you digitized the environment?
Okay, so we designed specifically to address adding sensors of any type, hopefully any type. So originally you start with simple sensors, which in our case is accelerometers, barometric pressure, light, and you take those sensors basically, and there's a great program that Google offers. It's called Science Notebook. It's an Android app. It's fantastic for kids, really, just people in general. It allows you to use, our phones have like 15 sensors on them. They're amazing. And it allows you to tap into those sensors and see the actual what is going on at any point in time. In other words, it shows you the frequency and amplitude, and naturally it all has to do with measurement. How often it measures, but you just see a line going up and down. That's really how we start. We start with simple sensors that have a line going up and down, and then we characterize that line going up and down, finding the frequency and the amplitude, and we collect that data. And in our case, we currently collect through BLE. We determined that it was probably the best protocol for us for power at the time. So this turns out to be the IoT conundrum. The IoT conundrum is if it's connected, it's no big deal. It's simple, Simon. But if it's not connected to a power source, then you're dealing with batteries, and now you're into the problem. So the problem is how can I characterize an environment with enough data from a battery source, because that's distance of signal transport. And BLE, it turns out to be the lowest power signal transport for the distance that's adopted by the most number of people. And
it has a pretty good bandwidth too.
Yeah. It is a pretty, I'd have to say, immature communication protocol, because it doesn't really handle the handoff, the connect and reconnect very well. That all has to be programmed by the people that are doing it. And the new mesh, I think, is much better at that, but we really haven't gotten into that very far.
And then just to clarify, you're using the Bluetooth on the humans, but not necessarily in the rooms, or is it also in the rooms?
No. We use Wi-Fi. Okay, so well, we use sensors, period, right, in the room on the person.
But I mean, the powering, the sensors that are powered by battery are on human or also in the room itself?
No. They're on the human unless it's some intermittent sensor, that someone's decided, like they can't run a power source to it because it's been glued to the ceiling or something, So a perfect example of that is an environmental sensor that checks for poisons in the air, right? One form or another. So there's a bunch of those out there right now, and for those, they write to a web address, and then we take that, we put it on our messaging platform, and our messaging platform transports data both ways. And our analytics for immediate representation of an event is all performed on the gateway. So the gateway is a hub. It could be a phone. In our case, we use the Android operating system, which can run on phones, watches, Android TVs, and we use that gateway to collect data from the BLE or from a Wi-Fi connection. We use a rapid transport connector, which means that basically publish, subscribe to a queue. So there's no analysis between the piece of data and the gateway. In other words, it's just it drops it off in a mailbox and someone picks it up.
Okay. And just to add a bit more, I guess, shine a little brighter light on this. What Phil's talking about is we've got a sensor, and let's say it's a breathing sensor, however that's being sensed. And we got to get the data. We got to get the data up to the cloud. And so the gateway that Phil's referring to here would be either a watch or it would be the phone, so the connection would be the Bluetooth from let's say the breathing sensor to the watch or the phone. And then the phone, which is where I think you're going to go now, then has to connect up to the internet, right? So then that's going to have to connect up, I'm guessing, through Wi-Fi, or is that the next step?
Okay. So, or cellular, right?
Or cellular, true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, which to 5G, I'm really looking forward to that.
Which makes actually a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's exactly right. So you can imagine any piece of data. We do 22 messages a second. Those are transported to a mailbox. The gateway. It's either transported to the gateway. Pulls it off of the mailbox. It's either transported directly to the gateway or it goes to a mailbox.
And what do you mean by mailbox?
The mailbox is the messaging system. Just someplace where
it's collecting.
Yeah, you're connected to it all the time, and you're just waiting for it. So once the gateway gets the data, then it goes through its analytics to combine those sensor pieces of information and the events to determine whether or not there's an alarm that needs to be sent.
Oh, so this analytics is all happening, we'll call it on the edge. So you're not doing it in the cloud. All your analytical, I won't say all, but at least these analytical operations are happening locally on what you're calling the gateway. That's pretty much on the body, probably.
Yeah. No, actually, no? So yes and no. Okay. Once again, you always go back to mobility. So if let's say you're in an assisted living community, and you're an old person, then you're wearing sensors or they're plugged into the walls around you, and then you have a permanent gateway, which in our case is an Android TV, and that's plugged into a wall somewhere.
Okay.
And then that collects data from the sensors that are around. That person moves, if they have a mobile sensor, they move from one gateway to the other, right? Because the distance of travel.
Nice.
250 meters, right? Which turns out to be the problem with BLE, right? Is that then you have to have a really robust handoff and hand-on thing.
So it's going then from the phone to this Android TV. Is that what you're saying? Or is it just skipping the phone altogether?
It goes from the sensor to the Android TV.
Okay, makes sense. All right. Okay. So, but that could run on a phone as it runs on an Android TV or a watch.
Or for that matter, a full Android system running on a watch.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Okay. So, then that gateway, it's an edge device. Mm-hmm. It has the analytic machinery, which is actually pulled to the configuration, what sensors it's going to connect to, which will allow it to connect to, which is the security issue, right? We not allow a sensor to be connected without it having been configured with the MAC address and a login. In other words, we require security encryption for us to even talk to the darn thing. And that's all brought down from the server in a configuration when the gateway logs in, and then it checks for updates every once in a while. Then it looks for those sensors, and when the sensor comes into the environment, it latches onto it, locks that sensor down with BLE, and starts pulling data from it at 22 messages a second. Then each one of those sensors, it's pulling data from, the gateway is, and then it's analyzing that data to see what's going on with respect to that person in their environment.
Okay.
And then it creates an event, and all data is moved back and forth through that messaging system. So we have raw data channels and we have event channels. Those event channels are listened to specifically by either the gateway so that it can connect to other people's software and or by clients, which are people that have mobile phones that are responding to an event.
Okay. So you're interpreting the data locally, let's call it locally, on the gateway. So we'll call it the edge, although, we could that's kind of a fluid term. And then the events you're talking about are kind of like, bed exit or fall detection. And then if these events occur, then you're going to have rules that are going to say, well, if someone exited their bed, then maybe you send a text message to their loved one, or maybe if someone falls, you send, some other messages. Is that kind of how it works?
Exactly. Yeah. We don't actually send the message. They pull it, but
okay. Right. All right. Makes sense.
And then there's a response mechanism, which this goes to the quality control that comes. I've been doing quality control. Well, I guess everybody in software has since early 90s. So originally it was for Intel on their ISO 9000 push into Europe. And the nature of all quality control loops is nonconformity, which we call an event. And then that nonconformity is followed up with an established criteria to find the systemic cause of it. And then once you've identified the systemic cause of the nonconformity, then you have a protocol for fixing that. It's back to the medical management software. Yep. That protocol for fixing it is then applied against the event, and then you check repeatedly over a period of time to see what the effectiveness of the protocol is, and then those protocols change, and you slowly modify your effectiveness, enhance your effectiveness for the initial event, and create rules that make it so the event doesn't happen. So that's the exact same thing we do. Which I think is how almost all companies these days that are worth their salt are dealing with any kind of event in their system, which, like, let's say a non-delivery event in warehousing or something like that, right? Yeah.
And the protocols, just to be clear for everyone, we don't want to conflate that with the technical protocols. We're talking about the actions or what you do when you interpret this information.
Exactly. Thanks a lot for clarification.
Yeah. Okay. And so we're collecting a lot of internal data. Are you using any external data sources? Are you connecting up to any services, or is it all pretty much local?
No. We do that, and really that connection is through that messaging system. Mm-hmm. See that it all goes down to that initial that initial decision to start the company with the guy that had a messaging.
Yeah. So you're using the heck out of it then.
Yeah. So basically, 2 lines of code connects anybody's data to a mailbox messaging that has a queue connected to it that is configured for any device and or person.
Okay. And so what sources of external data are you connecting to, just out of curiosity?
Well, right now we're just looking at environmental sensors that are, like CO2 and that kind of thing.
Okay. And all right, so this would still be within the environment, wouldn't it? Like I'm talking about, are you connected up to the weather channel, for example, see what the temperature is outside? Or
it's a darn good idea, Bruce. I'm going to use that.
All right. Okay. All right. So we're collecting all the data now. Let's talk about. So it sounds like you obviously were thinking about this top down, or maybe it's not obvious, but
no, top down. Some of it has been grown from the bottom, but I've been around a long time. So it means that people like us that have been writing software and solving problems for years and years, what makes us valuable is the fact that we can predict the future, meaning that we've done it for so long that we have some inkling of what they might actually need that they haven't thought of.
Right. We've got some pretty good AI or predictive or analytical models to interpret our environment and make a prediction as well.
Yeah, exactly. Really, that's what we're doing. And so top down, our design has not changed. It's a pretty robust design for 3 years. And we're just building it out. And it takes a while. IoT's not, there's a lot of problems with it. And those problems all basically circle around the limitations in technology. It's.
Yeah, no, that's right. So talk to us a little bit now. You work top down, and this is the right way to go. What's the value we're creating? What's the information we need? Okay, then to create that information, what's the data we need to collect? Now, the next step is going to be, kind of how we're going to collect that data and then how we're going to transform it. So how did you go about choosing your technical components? Because as you said, IoT is pretty complicated, and the reason it's complicated is because it's a big old system of systems, and you need to integrate all these pieces together. How did you go about choosing which vendor to go with, and what technology to use? What were your constraints or your filters in doing that?
Oh, great question. First thing was financial constraints. So,
okay, yeah.
So to be competitive against the big boys. And there are big players in this market. It means that you have to have a cost structure that doesn't just keep expanding. And the way that small companies get an expanding cost structure is they use what is seemingly a low cost item on a per unit basis that consumes their company as it scales. So, examples of that are if I were to use the built-in servers from Amazon rather than the bare bones servers, I have to pay an additional charge or per unit of CPU, and it just eats you up. So. Right. Anytime you choose to purchase something from somebody else that has a value added to it, you're adding to your costs. When you're a small company, you're balancing time to delivery against your cost structure. So all of our technology is based on those decisions of that balance point. There's a lot of really good open source software out there today. But Postgres is an awesome database. It is a great database. Postgres, yeah.
Okay, we'll put that in the show analysis notes.
Yeah. The reason it's a great database is because it's pretty darn fast. It's open architecture. Our design specifically allowed segmentation of users. So if you think about what we're delivering to, even if we're delivering to cities and counties, which is our last goal, you're delivering to 50,000 people at a shot. But the way that the county looks at their data is from their county perspective. You're not rolling up all the counties in the world, So that means that you can segment your servers and your applications based on that county, that company structure. So as long as you have scalability within that county, then you're good, right? So for us, we made sure that our messaging platform could handle 1 million messages a second, and that's why we chose RabbitMQ. So there are better. I mean, there are messaging platforms out there that handle 60 million, but they don't guarantee delivery. And in other words, you have to do the code to guarantee delivery, which means that you basically have to put a promise on your transactions. You never get something for nothing, and so for us, using RabbitMQ, open source messaging with high bandwidth, guaranteed delivery was a good decision. Then we use Postgres for our database. We use Postgres for a lot of different reasons. One is we can create new instances with the right configuration. It's very scalable. It's built for SQL. There's lots of packages to expand it, so that if you do have performance problems other than hardware costs, just expanding your hardware, you can get it to deliver. It's got geolocation, which it's got PostGIS, which is a service for geolocating things, geofencing for senior care. There's a company called Timescale DB that I really like this company. The guys that run this company, they're pretty new, but these guys are on the ball. They definitely are trying to deliver a quality product. It's got a few little glitches in it right now, but from the perspective of aggregation, rapid aggregation, 20,000 times faster than some natural Postgres SQL aggregates. It's a really solid product.
So let me just stop you there just to digest what you've been telling us. So going back to, I guess, your high-level filters or constraints when you're looking at the technology, you made up a great point, and that is financial constraints. And then in there, you are saying, take a look at the business model, because it may be pretty cheap to start with, but then it may get pretty onerous. So you have to be careful with the business model. You also made the point that open source, there's a lot of really good open source out there, so you don't necessarily have to be buying all commercial software. And then you kind of moved into the platform. And originally I was thinking RabbitMQ was a protocol. Maybe it is a protocol, but it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also an IoT platform is what you're saying. Is that correct?
No, it's a messaging platform. And specifically it's a packaging of AMQP and some of the other messaging protocols.
So a messaging protocol, are you differentiating that from a messaging platform? Are you differentiating that from an IoT platform, or
absolutely.
Are they synonymous? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So talk to us about the differences.
Okay. So an IoT platform, so messaging is how you transport data.
It's the application protocol. I mean, if one way of thinking about it, it's the application protocol that is doing the communication.
Yeah. Just think of it as a wire, a wire in a storage location, like a bucket or a pipe in a container. But an IoT platform, that has a lot to do with provisioning and maintenance. So when you think about IoT, if we go back to the old days with computers and companies, they would have to install thousands of computers, and they'd have to know what computer went with who, and what was the version of software on it, and who did they buy it from, and and if it broke, what is their maintenance contract on it, and all that stuff, right? So that's really provisioning, right? And for IoT, it's 100 times worse than that.
Yeah, we still have
yeah. I mean, that's the big cheese right there. That's where the problem is. When someone talks about IoT, it does not matter at all if they don't have provisioning and maintenance, because in fact, your problem is going to be, I handed out 100 sensors to 100 old people. They all went to lunch, and 4 of them were playing with the sensors together, flipping them and, dropping their drinks and whatever they were doing. And then they mixed them all up.
Right.
Okay, so now they all leave and they have each other's,
yeah.
Right. And then one threw one in the trash. And okay, so basically, you've got to be able to identify whether they got the right sensor and what sensors are working and what sensors aren't working, and how to swap them back and forth, and who have you given them to, and what was the cost of them, and what was the version of them, and what's the way, all that stuff, right? That's provisioning and the maintenance, right? That is an IoT platform. An IoT platform is provisioning, maintenance, messaging, and delivery of events. And if it's not doing that, it's not doing anything. In my opinion.
Okay, no, I like that. Talk to us now a little bit about security. Now you've talked about the authentication part of it, and so there's a source of authentication, and then there's also going to be some encryption. Maybe just at a high level, because we're winding down here. But just give us your thoughts on security and what role it played during the design and development of your system.
I have a philosophy on that, like I have on everything, unfortunately. Okay. You just do the best you can. It's a can of worms, and it always will be. So
it's never ending.
Yeah, it's never ending. You could spend every resource of your company trying to address that issue, and you would never address it. You would claim you did, though. So you take the community standards, whatever they are, at the time that you're implementing something. You do your best to implement those standards with the revenue structure or the cost structure that you have, meaning, set a budget, determine the highest viable bar that you can achieve with that budget, use the standards that are currently being pushed by, your technical community, and then move on, So let's take example of the video camera, right? Don't buy your video cameras from no names, in China. Make sure that you have, and these are normal things. Who doesn't check the login of their devices? Come on.
Everyone, or a lot of people.
I know everybody's throwing this stuff out there, but anybody that's been in the business a while, all of us, we all,
Those table stakes.
Yeah. So, just do what's right, just follow the rules, make sure that you have, that it knows the device, that in other words, the piece of information, what I know, who I know, and what he has, right? That's it. Yeah. So, so we do all that, right? And from the beginning, actually the guy that pulled me into the company, it was his greatest effort was to make sure that the messaging platform was secure. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Do the best you can, because it is an open-ended problem, and and I think what you're talking about, and I don't know if you did it directly or if it was more indirectly, but you're really talking about risk management in the sense of how much risk are you willing to tolerate. You use the the constraint or the level of community standards. And then, you can do this formally or informally. But yeah, you have to get something out there. You need to do the best you can. And right now, security is not one of those items that people are paying more for. And so you have to balance that. Now, there's going to be issues in terms of GDPR that's going to be coming up in Europe and how you use the data, but I don't want to go in there. How I want to, wrap things up is ask you about your challenges. What are the biggest challenges you're facing right now? Where you are right now?
Where we are right now, I'm dealing with packaging.
Okay.
So we buy sensors from anybody, really. Yep. We don't make our own. And then we have to package those sensors. And honestly, it's not something that we're good at, Yep. So we're dealing with putting those sensors in plastic packages, and making it so that they're usable. Seems like a small problem, but actually it's a big deal.
No, that's not a small problem. Yeah.
We deal with battery life and form factor. So we've been through many iterations on this, and we're finally coming down to a form factor that's got a larger battery on it, and I for the wearable sensors, and these batteries are the CR2450s.
Okay. Yeah. Those round, the flat round ones. Right?
Yeah, as opposed to the CR2032s. Okay, so there's a significant difference in the size. A third again the size, but it turns out that that size differential is still easily wearable. It's light and it's conformable.
Sure.
So
and lasts a lot longer.
And lasts. Yeah, maybe 8 times as long. So it's it's a big deal. The other thing is, so we've changed that. That's helping a lot. There's little issues with that. Actually, that's why the repackaging of finding a package for become a big deal, because the push button on it's in a different location. The next thing we're doing that's our big challenge is that we now are using Android watches, so full Android watches, not the new Google O. They just relabeled their.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I think they call it O-Wear or OS Wear. Yeah,
I can't remember.
Yeah. So anyhow, we use a full Android watch specifically for geofencing. So that's an implementation right now. That's a challenge. We're challenged by geofencing, in fact, because you need to be able to and indoor positioning systems. So really, it comes down to the same thing that have been the challenges for the last 3 years, which is power, and indoor positioning.
That kind of that's a pretty good summary, isn't it?
Yeah, that's like the world of wearables, really. I like that. Yeah, so same challenges as everybody else, but their solutions are fast and furious, and I love technology today. Unbelievable! It's unbelievable.
Yeah. No, it comes across. It does come across. Well, Phil, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed our conversation. Can you let everybody know how to find out more about you, your company, whatever you want to communicate?
You can find us at www.zanthion.com.
I'll put in the show notes. Okay.
And our goal is to provide value to our communities. We never provide value at someone else's expense, which means I don't ever want to sell a product and make money off of someone that doesn't provide greater than or equal to value. And this is our representation of what we think America is supposed to be. We will always provide more functionality at the exact same initial cost that you purchased into the product at. So, which is the beauty of IoT.
It is. Yeah,
we can add at no cost. And,
over the air. Make sure that's designed as well, right from the beginning. But have your OTA mechanism. But I like it. Are you looking for any partners? Or are you looking for any people? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. That is by far the hardest challenge in the Valley. First of all, finding people that are actually competent across the technology stack, that is hard because they get snapped up by Google and Yahoo. So that has been. I'd love to find a new CTO. I constantly have to trade off between business and technology, and it would be better if I could just focus on business. Anytime that there's a competent engineer, we're interested.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone's heard that. Yeah. If you're interested in this space, then contact Phil, and I'm sure there's a contact mechanism on your website. Right?
Of course there is. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I very much enjoyed the conversation, and it's excellent because this was kind of, I won't say guerrilla, but it was kind of real life, reality. How do you put together a product? You did a pivot, and I'm sure that was only one of the pivots you mentioned, and probably pivoted a number of other times. And it was enjoyable to listen to the pathway. And obviously, we could have spent a lot more time, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bruce, and really enjoyable to finally meet you. And nice to hear your thoughts. Yeah. And a good talk. Thanks a lot, and best of luck, of course.
Okay, well, that was episode 102. I like the number, even though it has a 17 in it. To get analysis of this episode, links to anything that was mentioned in the shows, plus the transcript, just go to the show analysis notes, all of which can be found at iot-inc.com/podcasts. You can go to the show analysis notes and get the PDF, or you can sign in or register with IoTinc.com with the long form. And if you do that with the long form, you get access to all the PDFs from all the podcasts, all the videos, and the special reports that I have in there. There's probably some other goodies in there too. It's called Bruce's Private Reserve. If you've been enjoying this podcast, subscribe. That way you can get every episode delivered straight to your device. There are 3 ways that you can support this podcast. You can share it on your blog, personal or company, if you found the information in it valuable. You can share it on social just by clicking on the show analysis notes, and then within there's some social widgets, or Twitter, LinkedIn. Those are the 2 that I socialize in. Or the big one, you can leave a rating or review on iTunes. Just go to, this is a shortcut, but just go to iot-inc.com/iTunes, and it'll give you instructions. It just takes 1 click to leave a rating, and a little bit longer if you want to write your thoughts. The podcast is free, but as mentioned at the beginning of the episode, the way you can support it financially is to buy the ICIP online training program if you think it's right for you. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening. Until next time, may your path to IoT business be a circuitous one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc. Business Show.